Well, you mentioned that very thing. I want to read a quote in the chapter on walking through blindness. You speak about this on page 78 of the book. And here's a quote. I want you to speak on it and unpack it a little bit for us. It says, their journey out of darkness unfolds as a series of transitional steps rather than occurring as an instantaneous event. With each step toward light, we're forced to make a choice. Will we give up on Jesus and settle for blurred vision, or will we continue to trust him to work all things for our good? I didn't like that. Because we want to, we so easily, I say we because I've been through it. I've counseled my family through it. I'm counseling other pastors through it. Stephen's been through it. We so easily, and it's really a pride thing, we want to identify ourselves now with the hurt. And you talk about these being forced to make a conscious choice. I just really was convicted by that last part. Will we give up on Jesus and settle for blurred vision, or trust him? Ouch. Unpack that for us if you could.
Well, the one thing that when you start by saying their journey out of darkness, it's referring to the different stories in the New Testament where Jesus gives physical sight to, I believe, 3 different men.
Yeah, absolutely.
Every situation was different. And I love that, in that Jesus does not work the same way in all of our lives. Hence, our grief journeys are very unique, very different. But Jesus also required something of each person as they went, and then had to follow his instructions to receive that healing and receive their sight. And the one that just stood out to me was the man who he opened his eyes and people looked like trees. And he could have just said, well, that didn't work, or thanks, Jesus. I mean, you didn't do very much, but okay, whatever.
Better than what I had, but I mean.
Yeah. But he continued to trust. He continued to obey and take the steps necessary. And so I think we need to be willing to just make the next step that God calls us to, whether we understand why he's calling us to do that or not. I will tell you that the years that before God called me to start Pastors Hope Network, I worked full-time for a nonprofit as their development person. And many times while I was there, it was a great job. I love the people I worked with that had a great mission, but there were still times I thought, God, why do you have me here? Why am I here? And when God called me 9 years later to start Pastors Hope Network, I thought, oh, wow, for 9 years I've been in training. Because for 9 years, I had worked closely with the CEO. I had worked closely with the accounting department. I had worked closely with the program director. And for 9 years, God was training me and equipping me to start a nonprofit from the ground up. But all I knew was that's where God had placed me. And until he told me to leave, that's where I was going to stay, even though it didn't make sense. And so part of it is trusting. If you know you're where God's placed you, even though if you don't know why, okay, just trust him that eventually the pieces are going to fit together.
So what are some of the first steps when this takes place? What are some of the first steps that can, because I talk to pastors all the time about the worst thing you can do is sit still. Do something. Take a step. So what are some of the first steps that you talk about that can start some momentum in this process?
Yeah. One of the worst things I think pastors can do is stay home in their sweats. And that's what you want to do if in the earlier days when you have been told you're out, you've lost your ministry position.
Stephen. She's been reading the mail.
You've been so wounded, so beat up. And so the steps are very, very practical.
Mm.
Set an alarm for the same time every day. Get up, make your bed, get dressed,
Yeah.
either shave or put on your makeup, make yourself presentable.
Mm.
Um, for one thing, you're much more productive in that uh,
Mhm.
when you are fully dressed, when you are
Mm.
fully ready for the day, your brain is more productive than
Mm.
if you just sit around in your sweats and decide, okay, I'm gonna work on my resume. Well, you're not in the right frame of mind. So do
Mm.
those
Mm.
very practical things. Eat 3 meals a day. You know, now I will be honest with you. My husband had to make me eat in the
Mm.
first weeks of our event.
Mm.
I actually lived on Ensure for at the first. I
Mm.
lost so much weight. I had to, but luckily it was in the wintertime. And I bought a pair of suspenders and wore under heavy sweaters to keep my pants up. That's how much, I mean, I lost so
I
much weight.
remember you writing that in the book.
I
I was
mean,
like,
it's just
Wow.
because it can just hit
mm,
you so hard. But
yeah,
do whatever you have to do to get
yeah.
protein in your body, stay nourished. Find a reason to get out of the house. Now,
Mm.
that's much easier to do if you're in a large city
Mm.
than if you're in a small town in the middle of nowhere, you know.
Mhm.
And there are just there are a lot of little towns, and
Yeah.
so that makes that's a challenge. I will tell you that.
Mhm.
But if you can get out of the house, go for a walk, be out in God's country, see, you know, the just the beauty, the nature. Um, do one thing a day that is facing forward, whether it's reading a book on forgiveness, because you know that's what you've got to work on. Maybe you know, I highly recommend Lewis Smead's book on forgiveness,
Mm.
Forgive and Forget, something, something the hurts we don't deserve. I forget the other word.
You've got these listed in your book, though,
Yes,
if I
I do.
remember right.
I do.
Yes,
I do have
yes,
that one listed.
yeah.
Um, and I knew from the get go. I mean, the first week after we were pushed out, I went to a bookstore and I bought that book because I knew I had to forgive. It
Mm.
wasn't an option. I did not want to. I knew I
Mm.
had to because it was a
I was,
command.
I, I was still on as you put in your chapter. Would you call it? You call it praying down the wrath of
Oh
God.
yeah. Oh
That
yeah.
justice, that
Yes.
justice. What I think for me was what I, I was like, Lord, I forgive, but I need justice.
Yes.
Kind of a thing.
Yes.
Some
Yes.
imprecatory psalms are coming down on
Oh
these.
yes. Oh,
Well,
no question.
I totally connected to the part of your book where you were talking about how you started reading, and you're reading some stories, and you really got together with some protagonists who were very much the macho, kind of guys who were just like, I'm going to go blow up half the city because this guy was bad and we're going to
Yes.
do justice.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Still one of my hero protagonists, and it was
I was
very
like,
therapeutic for
I
me.
wonder if that was Jack Reacher. No, just kidding.
Yes, indeed it was.
Gosh, yeah, you figured it
Yes,
out.
my
That's funny.
father-in-law got me hooked on those novels.
I
Something
can
else.
just picture you sitting in your living room and your husband walks in and you're like this with a book. You're like,
Yes. Yes. Well, because we all want somebody like that in
We
yeah.
our
do.
lives. And quite frankly,
Mhm.
we have someone, but God is going to judge in his own time and in his own way. And we have to leave that up to him.
Right.
And
Let me pull
it
that
is
blade out.
so hard. Oh,
You're
it is so
right.
hard. It is
It
so
is
hard.
hard.
Um,
Yes.
Another thing to do, work on your resume. That's forward thinking.
Mm.
And maybe even look for jobs. I wouldn't advise spending your whole day looking for jobs. That can get really difficult. So
Yeah.
I think it's beneficial if you have some sort of a schedule to your day and you say, okay, from 10 to 12, I'm going to look for jobs. After that,
Mm-hmm.
done. I'm going to do this. And otherwise, you can just go down into a dark hole with the whole.
I wrestled
job.
with, should I continue to try to find a ministry job or not? at the time, because I wrestled with the fact, well, this is what I know. This is what I went to seminary for. This is what
Right.
I've spent all these years doing. But then at the same time, I'm like, I'm not in the right space to be able to lead. So then what do I do? And
Right.
it was a rough back and forth in my mind on, it's you've got something that's taken away that you don't want to let go of, but you have to let go of it. But in order to move forward, I'm like, but that's scary over there. But am I really qualified to do that? And it's just a back and forth.
Yes, it is. And many of the clients we work with are in that exact position. They need to have some time to heal from what they've gone through.
Mhm.
I think it's very dangerous to go directly into another ministry position before you've healed it all. Otherwise, you drag an awful lot of baggage with you, and
Mhm.
that can hurt
Mm.
your next church. On the other
Yeah.
hand, you need to put food on the table.
Yeah.
You got to buy shoes for the kids. And
Yeah.
so it's good to, many times we'll have our clients do a vocational assessment to say, okay,
Yeah.
here are your strengths. What other jobs can you do with those same
Yeah. I
skills?
I to be open, it was pride swallowing. It
Mhm.
really was.
Oh,
It was
absolutely.
I just you gotta find work kind of a thing, and you gotta do what you have to do. And
Mhm.
now I had watched one of my favorite movies was The Legend of Bagger Vance. And the little boy was in there and he was talking bad about his father to the main golfer, which is Matt Damon's character. And Matt Damon said, "How dare you talk about your dad that way? While all these other men were filing bankruptcy and stuff, your dad pushed back poverty with a broom."
Mm,
And that stuck with me. And just so it was one of those things that I'm like, okay, if I have to push a broom, then I have to push a broom.
Yes.
And I did.
Yes.
I kind
And
of think.
and in that next job interview, when a pastor search committee says, "What have you been doing?" You can simply say, "I have been providing for my family. I
mm,
honored the responsibility that I had to take care of my family."
Mhm.
Um, as a and the temptation is to make your job hunt very spiritual and
mm,
to say, God's going to take care of me and he's going to provide the job for me and or provide the church for me
Mhm.
and go through your life savings.
mm,
I think God wants us to be active and like the blind men were, they had to take steps to get their sight fully back.
Mm.
We have to
Mm.
take steps. And then in a practical way, it's easier to steer a moving object. And so if you are out there in the workforce, we've had a client work for Chick-fil-A and became a leadership training person for Chick-fil-A.
wow.
He was out there.
Mm,
Um, get a job where you are with people and
Mm.
those people can eventually maybe be a reference on your resume, or you're talking to people and you're networking with them that they may know your story and say, "Hey, I heard of this for you." All those things can happen. Your mind stays more active. It also gives you a reason to have to get up in the morning and you have to get ready and you have to leave the house. And you may be going to sell cars. And
mm.
yes, it's difficult, um, but it's much better than just sitting at home, waiting for the heavens to part, when God really needs you to, take some action.
Take some
And
steps.
yes,
Mhm.
yeah,
And I think God works through that obedience.
I do too.
I don't think our obedience causes God or unlocks anything. I think but God does honor our obedience. And for me, I was putting people on golf carts at uh, oh,
Golf
resort,
country club.
like a resort area.
Oh, okay.
And I remember those times where I would, I had those arguments with God. I'm like, I have this degree, I have that degree. From you,
Yes.
here's where you use a golf cart, which
Mhm.
even a 2-year-old can figure out. But finding moments of seeing God work, even in that. It was so tough to do.
Yes.
But it got me thinking about something else, and I figured out it gave my mind a break,
Yes.
a mental break.
Mhm.